Step aside. First class is not a charity program, and this jet bridge is not a bus stop. I do not know how you got that pass, but you are not boarding my aircraft. Captain Douglas Holt did not shout. That was the thing about him. He never needed to. His voice came out low and flat the way a door sounds when it locks from the outside. He stood in the entrance of the Boeing 7874, gold stripes catching the fluorescent hum of the jet bridge lights. And he looked at the woman in front of him, the way people look at something they have already decided does not belong. She was small, 5'4" in worn white sneakers, an oversized Howard University hoodie that swallowed her frame, black leggings, hair pulled back in a messy bun, not a single piece of jewelry. No designer bag, no silk blouse, no signal of wealth that Douglas Holt recognized as real. She held a boarding pass in her right hand. She did not step aside. What Captain Holt did not know, what he could not have known because he had not read the memo that had gone out to senior executives 2 hours earlier because men like Douglas Holt skimmed memos and filed them away unread, was that the woman standing in front of him had spent the morning in a boardroom on the 51st floor of One Liberty Plaza signing a contract worth $4.2 billion. She had not just bought a ticket to London. She had bought the airline, the jet, the terminal, the red carpet at the first-class check-in lane, the gold stripes on Douglas Holt's shoulders, all of it. 3 hours and 14 minutes before he opened his mouth. Dr. Naomi Rivers had become the majority shareholder and acting CEO of Callaway Atlantic Airways. And in approximately 42 minutes, Douglas Holt was going to find that out in the worst possible way. In a narrow jet bridge in front of 30 witnesses with a travel vlogger's phone pointed directly at his face. The question was never whether Naomi Rivers would board that plane. The question was how much it would cost him when she did. Let us go back to the beginning. The air in the conference room on the 51st floor of One Liberty Plaza tasted like recycled anxiety and old coffee. It had that particular quality that expensive rooms get when the people inside them are losing something. A staleness underneath the mahogany and the floor-to-ceiling glass, underneath the view of Lower Manhattan, spreading out toward the water like a gray quilt. The board of directors for Callaway Atlantic Airways sat on one side of the table. 8 men and 1 woman, all of them in suits, that cost more than most people's monthly rent, all of them with the particular posture of people who have spent the last 3 years watching something they built slowly fall apart. Callaway Atlantic had been bleeding for a long time. $340 million in losses over 36 months. A brand that had once meant something. Old money, established roots, the kind of airline where flight attendants remembered your name. Now meant late departures, overpriced tickets, and a customer satisfaction score that had dropped 11 points in a single fiscal year. Nobody wanted to buy it. Nobody except one person. Naomi Rivers sat at the head of the table. She was not wearing a suit. She was wearing the same Howard University hoodie she had since her sophomore year, soft from 100 washes, the logo a little cracked at the edges. Black leggings, white sneakers that had seen better days but were clean. Her hair was back, no jewelry except a small gold stud in her left ear that had been there so long she sometimes forgot about it. She was not reading the room. She was reading the contract. She turned pages with the same focus she had at 19, working through advanced calculus problem sets at 2 a.m. in a dorm room she shared with 3 other people. The same focus she had at 24, writing the first version of the logistics algorithm that would eventually make Rivers Logic the most cited predictive systems company in the industry. The same focus she had brought to 14 acquisitions before this one. She reached the last page. She picked up the pen. She signed her name. She pushed the contract back across the polished wood. Marcus Reyes, her chief legal counsel, 38 years old, the kind of calm that comes from having seen every version of high-stakes chaos, slid a tablet toward her and said quietly, "Wire transfer confirmed, Naomi. $4.2 billion. You are officially the majority shareholder and acting CEO of Callaway Atlantic Airways." Naomi tapped the screen, verified the transaction ID, set the tablet down. She did not smile. She did not reach for the champagne that someone had optimistically placed in the center of the table. She looked up at Franklin Ward, the outgoing CEO, 63 years old, a sheen of perspiration on his forehead that had nothing to do with the room temperature, and she asked one question. "Is the London flight still on schedule?" Ward blinked. He had prepared remarks, a transition document, a carefully worded statement about legacy and partnership and the future of Callaway Atlantic. None of that had included the new owner asking about departure times before the ink was dry. Yes. CA771 departing JFK at 7:40. You will want us to call the station manager, have them prepare We can do a proper welcome press photos at the gate if you... No, Naomi said. One word. Ward stopped. "I am flying tonight," she said, standing and reaching for the hoodie she had draped over the back of her chair. Incognito. No announcement, no red carpet, no escort. I want to fly as a regular first-class passenger and see how this airline treats people when nobody is watching. The silence in the room had texture to it. Marcus leaned over and said in the tone he used when he was genuinely concerned but knew arguing was pointless, "Naomi, Callaway has a reputation. The complaints we have seen, the suppressed ones, they were specific. The pattern is not subtle." "I know." She pulled the hoodie on. "That is why I need to see it myself. Not through a report, not through a deposition. Through the front door." She picked up her passport and her single carry-on backpack. No roller bag, no designer luggage, nothing that would signal money to anyone paying attention to signals. "If anyone in this room leaks my identity before I land at Heathrow," she said, looking at each person at the table. In turn, her voice still completely even. "Every severance package and transition bonus we discussed today becomes void. Do I make myself clear?" Nobody spoke. "Good." She looked at Marcus. "I will need the authorization code loaded into the ops system before I get to the gate. Alpha Delta 77. Make sure Walsh knows it is active." Marcus nodded, already typing. Naomi walked to the door. She paused once, hand on the frame, and looked back at the room, at the nervous board members at the mahogany table, at the untouched champagne catching the afternoon light. "I am not buying this airline to put my name on it," she said. "I am buying it to find out what is broken. Tonight is the first step." She left. Behind her, the room exhaled. The black Cadillac Escalade moved through Van Wyck Expressway traffic with the particular patience of a car that knew it would eventually get where it was going. Outside, the overpass grids and industrial sprawl of Queens slid past in the gray late-afternoon light. Inside, it was quiet. Marcus sat beside Naomi with a legal pad on his knee, going through the handoff checklist. He had been her counsel for 6 years. He knew when to talk and when to wait. Carla Okonkwo, 29 years old. Naomi's executive assistant, the most organized person Naomi had ever met, was on the phone, her voice clipped and precise as she worked through the logistics from the Rivers Logic office uptown. CA771, Carla confirmed. Seat 1A. Full fare paid in cash through a shell booking, so the name does not flag internally until someone runs it manually. Ticket shows Naomi Rivers Drive, but the account is not linked to the acquisition documents. It will look like a regular booking to anyone at the gate, and the authorization code Alpha Delta 77 is live in the ops system as of 4 minutes ago. Director Walsh has been briefed. He is the one who flagged the suppressed complaints to me 6 weeks ago. He has been waiting. A pause. He said, and I am quoting, "Tell her it is about time." Naomi almost smiled. "Good. Tell him to keep his phone on." Marcus looked up from his legal pad. "You have done this before." It was not a question, but she answered it anyway. When I bought the Patterson Distribution Center in Memphis 3 years ago, she said, I went in as a temp, spent 2 days on a loading dock before I told anyone who I was. She watched the highway lights beginning to click on in the early dusk. You learn things that way. Who talks down to the people beneath them in the org chart? Who is actually good at their job versus who is good at performing their job for the right audience? And what did you find in Memphis 2 managers who were quietly excellent and had been overlooked for years, and 1 VP who was the reason turnover was at 34%? She paused. The VP was gone by the end of the week. The 2 managers run the facility now. Marcus nodded slowly. He set his legal pad down. Callaway is different, Naomi. The issues we have documented are not about management efficiency. The complaints that Walsh flagged, they are about passengers, about how this airline treats people at the gate on the plane in the air. And the pattern is not random. I know what the pattern is. Her voice was quiet. I have been on the receiving end of the pattern. He did not push. He understood. Walsh said the crew on CA771 is standard rotation, Carla reported. Lead flight attendant is Amber Lou, 31. The captain is Douglas Holt. Senior check airman, 31 years with the company. Any flags on Holt? A pause on Carla's end, the kind that meant she was choosing words. 7 formal complaints in the last decade, all closed without action. 3 from passengers, 4 from junior crew members. Conduct issues, condescending behavior. 1 passenger described him as, she read directly, the kind of person who decides who belongs somewhere before they have finished walking through the door. Naomi looked out the window. The airport was visible now, the distant lights of JFK rising from the flat landscape. Who signed off on closing those complaints? His union rep and the chief pilot before Walsh, both retired. And Walsh. Walsh tried to reopen 2 of them last year. He was told to leave it alone. Naomi was quiet for a moment. Then, he is not going to be told that anymore. The Escalade turned toward Terminal 5. Naomi checked her reflection in the dark glass of the window. Hoodie, messy bun, no makeup, and looked away. The test was beginning. JFK, Terminal 5 at 6:15 in the evening, was its own particular kind of organized chaos. The sound hit first, the layered hum of several thousand conversations, the percussion of suitcase wheels on hard floors, the monotone waterfall of departure announcements that passengers had long since learned to tune out. The smell was jet fuel and fast food and the specific human scent of people who had been traveling for too long. Naomi moved through it the way she moved through everything, with her attention fully present and her expression giving nothing away. She had flown through private wings and VIP lounges for the last 6 years. She had forgotten almost what the main terminal felt like, the scale of it, the noise. She remembered now. The Callaway Atlantic check-in area was set up in a familiar configuration. The economy line snaking back toward the entrance, long and loud and restless and separated from it by a velvet rope and a strip of red carpet, the first class and elite lane. Empty. Pristine. Waiting. Naomi stepped onto the red carpet. The reaction was instant. The woman behind the first-class desk looked up before Naomi had taken 3 steps. Her name tag read Patricia Morse. She was 41 with a blonde bob cut so precisely it might have been drawn with a ruler and the particular expression of someone who had decided something before it was finished happening. Her eyes went from Naomi's hoodie to her leggings to her sneakers to her single backpack in the time it took to draw a breath. She did not see a full-fare first-class ticket. She did not see a black titanium credit card. She did not see 34 years of building something from nothing. She pointed. Economy is back there, she said, her voice bright and sharp, the tone of someone accustomed to redirecting people without feeling a thing about it. The pointed finger aimed past Naomi toward the long, loud line behind her. Naomi did not stop walking. She came to the desk, set her passport down, and placed the Amex black titanium card beside it with a quiet click. "I know where economy is," she said. "I am checking in for CA771 to London, seat 1A. Patricia did not pick up the passport. She looked at it where it lay on the desk as though proximity was sufficient inspection. Then she looked at the card. Her expression did not change. "This is the priority lane," she said. "Full fare first class and Diamond Medallion members only. If you were upgraded, that processing is at the main desk." "I did not ask for an upgrade." Naomi's voice was level. "I purchased a full fare ticket. Seat 1A. The ticket is in my name." "Are you going to check me in?" Patricia picked up the passport now, finally holding it at a slight angle as though she were reading something in poor light. She turned to her computer. She typed. The keystrokes were aggressive. Not fast aggressive, the kind of typing that communicated displeasure to anyone within earshot. She stopped. She had found the booking, the full fare, the ticket price, the seat. Her expression did not soften. It recalibrated. "I need to see the card used for the original purchase," she said. "We have been dealing with fraudulent bookings." Naomi tapped the card already sitting on the desk. "That one." Patricia picked it up. The Centurion card was cold and heavy and undeniably real. The kind of card that exists by invitation only issued to fewer than 10,000 people in the world. Patricia had probably never held one. The weight of it registered in her face for one fraction of a second before her expression closed back down. She held the card a moment longer than necessary. Then she began printing the boarding pass, but she did not hand it over. "I should mention," she said, "there is a smart casual guideline for the first-class cabin. That hoodie is borderline." Naomi looked at her. A full, quiet, unhurried look. "I have read the Callaway Atlantic carriage contract," she said. "All 47 pages. The dress code provisions apply exclusively to non-revenue staff travelers. Paying customers may wear what they choose. That has been the policy since 2019 when the airline settled a complaint with the Department of Transportation about exactly this issue." She paused. "Are you denying me service?" Patricia stared. Naomi waited. A beat of silence that was not comfortable for anyone. Then Patricia slapped the boarding pass onto the desk. Not dropped it, slapped it, the small act of defiance available to her, and said, "Gate C12. Boarding in 50 minutes. Do not cause trouble." Naomi picked up the boarding pass, the passport, and the card. She looked at Patricia Morse one final time. Not with anger, not with contempt, but with the particular stillness of someone making a note. "Smile next time," Naomi said. "You represent the brand." She walked away. Behind the desk, Patricia watched her go with an expression she could not have named. Something about that last sentence did not sit right. Something about the way it was said. Not as a suggestion, but as something else. Something that sounded almost like a reminder. She shook it off. She called the next passenger. 30 feet away, Naomi pulled out her phone and typed a brief message to Carla. "Ground staff, C12. Conduct issue. Dress code fabrication hostile check-in. Name Patricia Morse. Strike 1. Log it." Carla's response came back in 11 seconds. Logged. Timestamp noted. Safe travels. Naomi put her phone away and walked toward security. The first test was done. The grade was not passing. The Callaway Atlantic Horizon Lounge on the C concourse was the kind of place that was trying to be something it was not quite managing to be. The furniture was nice. Low leather chairs, a long bar in the back with a display of bottles that were more decorative than rotated. The lighting was warm. The carpet was thick enough to muffle footsteps. But there was something slightly tired about it. The way there is about anything that used to be the best option and has since been outpaced. The competitor lounges at Terminal 5 had been refurbished in the last 2 years. The Callaway Lounge had not. Naomi noted this. She also noted the way the 3 staff members in the lounge arranged their attention. There was a white-haired couple near the bar with luggage that announced itself. Monogrammed, matched the kind of luggage that has its own insurance policy. Both lounge attendants moved toward them the moment they sat down. Water was offered. The menu was explained. A pillow was produced from somewhere. A man in a gray suit entered behind Naomi, found a seat across the room, and was approached within 90 seconds. He was white, mid-50s, with the posture of someone who expected to be approached. Naomi sat in a corner chair and waited. She was not approached. She got up, after 5 minutes, went to the self-service station, poured her own sparkling water, and returned to her chair. She was still not approached. She was watching the room not with frustration, but with the focused attention of someone collecting data. This was information, every moment of it. Near the entrance to the lounge, she noticed something else. A black man, mid-40s, well-dressed in a navy suit, carrying himself with the specific straightness of someone who has learned that posture is a form of armor, approached the lounge desk and held up his boarding pass. The desk attendant, a young woman with her hair pulled back, asked to see his membership card, despite the fact that he had already scanned in at the lounge door. The scan had been green. The system had cleared him. She asked anyway. He produced the card without visible reaction. His face was composed in a way Naomi recognized from the inside. 2 minutes later, a white man in a golf shirt walked past the same desk without pausing, pass loose in his hand, and the attendant waved him through with a smile. Naomi wrote 2 names in the Notes app on her phone. She wrote a single observation beside them. Pattern. Not isolated. She did not flag it to Carla yet. She would wait until she had more. Across the lounge, a young woman in a staff uniform glanced over. Early 20s, dark hair, a small silver name tag Naomi could not read at this distance. For a moment, their eyes met. The young woman looked away quickly, then looked back, then looked at the boarding pass sitting on the arm of Naomi's chair. Something crossed the young woman's face. A flicker of recognition, or something close to it. She did not come over. The departure announcement for CA771 crackled through the lounge speakers. First and business class boarding gate C12. Naomi finished her water. She stood, adjusted the strap of her backpack, and walked toward the door. She did not know it yet, but the young woman with the silver name tag was Sophia Navarro, and she was about to be working the gate. Gate C12 was crowded the way international gates always are at push time. The particular compression of people who are almost somewhere else, standing in the patient, impatient way of travelers who know the process but resent it anyway. The gate area smelled of coffee and boarding anxiety. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the 787 sat on the tarmac in the fading evening light, lit from underneath by the amber wash of ground lights. Naomi joined the Group 1 line. She was the first person there. She had 3 minutes to observe the gate area before boarding began. Henderson Park was easy to spot, seat 2C per the manifest Carla had shared. He was 47, with the focused efficiency of someone running through materials on his phone rather than scrolling. He had an expensive briefcase and the kind of quiet confidence that did not need to announce itself. Diane Prescott was on the phone. She had been on the phone since at least the lounge, based on the volume of her voice arriving before she did. 52 white private equity money worn in the specific way of someone for whom wealth has never been a surprise. She was describing the suite she had booked at Claridge's to whoever was on the other end. She was not speaking quietly. Noah Castillo was 24 and did not look like someone about to board a transatlantic first-class flight, which is exactly why he was perfect for the job he did not yet know he was doing. He had a Canon camera around his neck and a travel vlogger's eye for interesting frames. He was currently filming the gate area with the practiced casualness of someone who had learned to shoot without people noticing. Rosa Delgado stood near the window, a small woman with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses, pushed up on her head holding a paperback she was not reading. She was looking at the plane. She had the stillness of someone who has flown enough times that the novelty is gone but the wonder is not. Sofia Navarro was at the gate desk. She was the young woman from the lounge. Up close, Naomi could read her name tag clearly now. Sofia was 27 with quick dark eyes and the practiced calm of someone good at a job that required managing 100 small crises an hour without letting any of them show. She scanned boarding passes with the steady efficiency of someone on the back end of a long shift. When Naomi's boarding pass came up, Sofia placed it under the reader. The machine beeped green. Sofia looked at the screen. She went still for just a moment. Almost imperceptible, the kind of still that happens when what you are seeing does not match what you expected to see. Then she looked up at Naomi. The boarding pass showed Rivers. Naomi Doctor, Seat 1A, Priority. Executive Override, Tag EO-Primary. Sofia had worked Callaway Atlantic Gates for 4 years. She had seen the executive override tag exactly once before during a training simulation. She knew what it meant. She held the boarding pass for 1 second longer than the system required. Then she handed it back. "Safe travels, Dr. Rivers," she said. Her voice was quiet. Under the ambient noise of the gate area, only Naomi could hear it. Naomi looked at her. A brief, clear look. She nodded once. She walked toward the jet bridge. The boarding door opened into the long, downward slope of the tunnel. Narrow walls, fluorescent light, the low vibration of the plane's auxiliary systems coming through the floor. Outside the porthole windows, the tarmac lights made orange pools in the dusk. Naomi walked. The jet bridge was not quite empty. Somewhere at the end of it, where the tunnel met the aircraft door, there was a shape. A large shape, broad-shouldered and uniformed. And the sound of laughter, a man's laughter, easy and comfortable. Then the laughter stopped. Before we go any further, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you have ever been told you do not belong somewhere you had every right to be, in a meeting, at a counter, on a plane, anywhere, this story is for you. Because what happens in the next few minutes inside that jet bridge is the kind of thing people watch and say, "I have felt that. I know that look. I know exactly what she is standing in." If this is hitting you somewhere real right now, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps more than you know, and it means this kind of story keeps getting told. Now, let us go back. Because at the end of that jet bridge, Captain Douglas Holt has just seen a woman in a Howard University hoodie walking toward his aircraft. And in the time it took him to take her in, hoodie, leggings, worn sneakers, single backpack, he has already made a decision. He does not know yet what that decision is going to cost him. Let us watch him make it. Captain Douglas Holt had been flying the London route for 11 years. He knew Gate C12 the way he knew his own kitchen. The angle of the jet bridge, the particular acoustics of the tunnel, the way the light changed when the boarding door was open versus closed. He had stood at this threshold hundreds of times, watching passengers funnel past him toward their seats, and he had never once questioned his authority to decide what belonged on his aircraft. He was 58 years old, silver-haired, broad through the shoulders, with a jaw that looked like it had been installed by someone who wanted to make a point. 31 years of Callaway Atlantic, senior Czech airman. The 4 gold stripes on his shoulders had been there so long they felt like part of his body. He had been telling Amber Lou a story about a delay in Frankfurt. He was laughing at his own punchline when the movement at the top of the jet bridge caught his eye. A woman. Coming down. His laughter finished itself out of momentum more than feeling. His eyes moved over her in the automatic, efficient way of a man who had spent 3 decades assessing situations quickly. Hoodie, leggings, sneakers with some wear on them, 1 backpack, the kind students carry, no rolling bag, no designer logo, no marker of the passenger profile he associated with Seat 1A on this route. He stepped out from the doorway into the center of the jet bridge. Not a dramatic step, not a declarative gesture, just a step, the kind that closes a gap, that establishes a boundary, that says this space requires your explanation without any words at all. Amber, behind him, felt the shift. She had worked under Holt for 6 years. She knew what that step meant. Naomi reached him. She stopped. Not because he had said anything, because he was standing in the middle of a corridor that had one purpose: moving people forward. And he had made himself an interruption in it. She looked at him. She waited. Step aside. Holt's voice was low and unhurried and absolutely certain of itself. First class is not a charity program, and this jet bridge is not a bus stop. I do not know how you got that pass, but you are not boarding my aircraft. The sentence landed in the fluorescent hum of the tunnel. Naomi did not step aside. She did not raise her voice or her shoulders or anything else. She simply stood where she was, and she looked at him with the look of someone who has heard a version of this sentence before and has long since stopped being surprised by it. She raised her right hand. In it was the boarding pass. Seat 1. A, she said. Naomi Rivers. Would you like to scan it, Captain? Or would you prefer to keep guessing? Her voice was a contralto, smooth and even calibrated to carry no more heat than the sentence required. She was offering him information. She was offering him the chance to look at the paper in front of him and reverse a course he had already set. Holt looked at the boarding pass. He looked at her face. He looked at the hoodie. He did not take the boarding pass. Something settled behind his eyes. Not doubt, not reconsideration. Decision. The kind that has already been made and is now only looking for the language to justify it. Amber shifted her weight in the galley doorway. The boarding pass stayed in Naomi's hand. He did not reach for the boarding pass. He crossed his arms. I have been flying this route for 11 years, Holt said. I know my regulars. I know the manifest patterns on this service. And I know. He paused as though he were being careful, as though precision mattered to him. When something does not add up. What does not add up? Naomi asked. You do not fit the profile of a first-class passenger on CA771. The sentence floated between them in the tunnel's recycled air. Naomi tilted her head slightly. It was a minimal movement, barely perceptible, but it communicated something. The specific patience of someone who has decided to give a situation exactly enough rope to hang itself. What profile is that, Captain? He did not answer. He did not have an answer that he could say out loud. He shifted instead back to the territory of procedure where he was more comfortable. I need to verify your identity before we can proceed. Where did you purchase this ticket online? Using my card. Which card? Naomi reached into the front pocket of her backpack and held up the Amex black titanium card. She did not hand it to him. She held it where he could see it, the way you might show a suspicious customs officer a document you know is in order. Holt looked at the card. He recognized what it was. The weight of it was visible even from a foot away. The particular density of a card that exists in a different category from ordinary credit. His jaw moved slightly. Not speech. Adjustment. Seat 1A was booked under the name of a Dr. Rivers, he said. That name. He paused again, and this pause carried something Naomi had learned to identify over years of boardrooms and pitch meetings and conference tables where certain people defaulted when challenged to a very specific category of doubt. That is not typically a woman's name. It is my name, Naomi said. It has been for 34 years. Would you like to see my passport, Captain? Or are you going to continue cataloging the ways in which my existence does not match your expectations? Behind Holt, in the galley doorway. Amber Lou stood very still. She had heard that kind of sentence before. She had stood very still in response to it before, This was the particular paralysis of someone who knows what she is witnessing and is calculating the personal cost of saying so. She did not say anything. She watched. Holt's face did a thing that faces do when a man has publicly committed to a position and finds himself without the intellectual materials to defend it. The expression hardened, not because he had more certainty, because he had less and more certainty was the only armor he had. "I have not cleared you to board," he said. "Until I do, you stay here." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that I am the captain of this aircraft, and under the authority granted to me by FAA regulations, I have the right to determine who boards this plane. That authority exists in relation to safety concerns," Naomi said. "You have not articulated a safety concern. You have articulated a preference." She paused. "Those are different things, Captain. I would encourage you to think about which one you want on record." The word record landed with a soft weight. From above them at the top of the jet bridge, the first members of the boarding queue were beginning to make their way down the tunnel. The narrowness of the jet bridge, its single-file nature, its inescapability, meant that a blockage at the bottom would create a backup almost immediately. Within 60 seconds, there were 6 passengers behind Naomi. Within 90, there were 12. Henderson Park was among them. He had been scrolling a document on his phone and had looked up at the unusual stillness of the line. He registered the scene, a large pilot in a pressed uniform standing in the doorway of a plane, a small woman standing in front of him with a boarding pass in her hand, the two of them occupying the full width of the tunnel like a knot in a garden hose. He lowered his phone. Noah Castillo was 4 people behind Henderson. He had already noticed the scene before he reached the top of the ramp. He had paused at the entrance of the jet bridge and watched for a few seconds the automatic assessment of a content creator trying to determine if what he was seeing was what he thought he was seeing. He started down the ramp. He did not put his camera away. At the bottom, Holt had not moved. He was looking at the growing queue behind Naomi with the expression of someone reassessing the dimensions of the arena they had chosen. He lowered his voice, not to be kind, but to keep the conversation at a scale he still controlled. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "I do not know how you got that pass. Maybe you have a contact somewhere in the system. Maybe it was a mistake at check-in. But I run a tight operation on this route, and my operation does not include putting people in first class who—" He stopped, not because he had finished, because he saw in Naomi's eyes something that made him aware in the way you sometimes become aware of a step that is not there, that the sentence he was in the middle of had no safe ending. He stopped. The sentence hung in the air unfinished, and therefore somehow more complete than if he had said it. Naomi looked at him for a long, quiet moment. "I am going to give you one more opportunity to look at my boarding pass," she said. "I would take it." He did not. The line behind Naomi was now 20 people deep, and the sounds of it had changed. The shuffle of feet, the low murmur of inconvenienced conversation, these had given way to something quieter and more focused. People had stopped looking at their phones. They were looking at the bottom of the jet bridge. Holt felt the audience. He had spent 31 years performing competence for audiences. He knew how to use the weight of a crowd, how to let it back him up. He straightened, and his voice found the register he used for announcements carrying and clear. "Amber," he said, not looking back at the flight attendant. "This passenger has been unable to verify her identity to my satisfaction. Please flag the situation with the gate." Amber did not move, she said from the galley doorway. She scanned clean at the gate. "Captain." "Green board. Scanning green does not confirm identity. Her boarding pass confirmed. Her passport confirmed." Amber's voice was careful quiet, but it was there. "She has provided both. I did not ask for your read on the situation." Holt's voice snapped back at her, not loudly, but with the efficiency of someone who has silenced people this way before. "I asked you to flag it." Amber said nothing more. but she also did not reach for the gate phone. It was into this specific pause, Amber's silence, Holt's irritation, Naomi's unmoving stillness, that First Officer Travis Webb appeared from the cockpit. Webb was 44 with a pilot's tan, and the kind of face that defaulted to agreeableness. He had been Holt's first officer on this route for 3 years. He had learned to read Holt's posture the way you learn to read weather. He saw the posture. He came to support it. Situation, he said, stepping out behind Holt. Unverified passenger. She is holding up boarding. Webb looked at Naomi. He did the same quick calculation Holt had done, arrived at a compatible conclusion, and adopted the tone he used for procedural obstacles. Ma'am, if there is a verification issue, we can get you back to the gate desk and sort it out from there. Should not take long. There is no verification issue, Naomi said. My documents are in order. Your captain has decided for reasons he has not been able to articulate that he does not want me on this aircraft. Those are different situations. Webb opened his mouth, closed it. He was not prepared for that level of precision. From behind Naomi, Diane Prescott's voice arrived before she did, a sharp, practiced sound that had spent decades getting people to move. Is there a problem? Some of us have connecting schedules. She pushed forward through the line without quite making contact with anyone, the specific spatial assertiveness of someone who has never been told to wait. She was in full Claridge's Bound mode, cream silk blazer, the kind of structured handbag that costs more than a business-class ticket eyes that assessed and dismissed in the same motion. They dismissed Naomi in that motion. Clearly there is a situation, Diane said, looking at Naomi the way people look at weather that has gotten in their way. Then to Holt with the collegial warmth of people who share an assumption. Can we sort this out quickly? I have been in transit since this morning. Working on it, ma'am, Holt said with a courtesy he had not offered Naomi once. Diane settled into position beside Holt with the naturalness of someone joining a team she recognized. She looked at Naomi. There are other flights, she said, almost helpfully. If this one is not working out. Naomi looked at her. A clear, measured look that lasted exactly long enough. This one is working out fine, she said. I have a valid ticket and a valid seat. The only thing not working is the person standing between me and it. Diane's expression cycled through surprise offense and the particular displeasure of someone unaccustomed to being answered. From 4 places back in the line, Noah had his phone out. He was not dramatically filming. No held-up arm, no obvious camera angle. The phone was at chest height, tilted just enough to capture the bottom of the jet bridge. Holt's broad silhouette, Naomi's stillness. Webb off to the side. Diane now fixed in position like a second wall. He typed a caption with his thumb, Callaway Atlantic pilot, personally blocking black woman from first class. Valid ticket. Valid ID. JFK, right now, Flight C, A, 771. Nobody has moved. He posted it to X. In the first 90 seconds, 47 people reshared it. Naomi was not aware of the post. She was watching Holt recalibrate. He had the crowd now. Or he thought he did. Diane beside him. Webb behind him. The weight of the queue pushing against Naomi from behind. He had all the geometry of authority on his side. Ma'am, he said, and the ma'am had a door-closing sound to it. This discussion is over. I need you to step back to the gate area for secondary verification, or I will have you escorted. You are delaying a scheduled international departure. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I am going to remember that you said that. It did not sound like a threat. It sounded like a note being made, which was somehow worse. The jet bridge had become its own country in the past 6 minutes, a country with a population of 31, a border dispute at its southern end, and no clear way out for anyone. Henderson Park had gotten close enough to see clearly. What he saw was this. A woman standing with a boarding pass in her hand, not moving, not raising her voice, not doing anything that could be called a disturbance. And in front of her a pilot in a four-stripe uniform who had decided, without apparent cause, and without being able to say why out loud, that she did not belong where her ticket said she did. Henderson had done enough litigation in his career, enough depositions, enough rooms where people said things they later tried to unsay, to know exactly what he was watching. He raised his voice enough to carry. "Hey, I have been standing back here for 4 minutes watching this. She was first in line. She has a ticket. What is actually the problem?" Holt turned his head. "Sir, this does not concern you. Please stay back. She is blocking the entire boarding line because you will not let her board." "How does that not concern everyone in this line?" A few people behind Henderson made small sounds of agreement. Not declarations, just the low-level vocal acknowledgement of people who have been thinking something and suddenly have permission to express it. Holt's jaw tightened. Rosa Delgado had worked her way to the third position behind Henderson. She was 61 and small and looked like someone's grandmother traveling to see her grandchildren, which is exactly what she was. She was also someone who had watched the same scene in different costumes her entire adult life and had reached the age where silence felt more expensive than speaking. She did not say anything yet. She stepped forward and placed her hand gently on Naomi's shoulder, not in solidarity, not in protest, just in contact. The quiet, non-performative presence of someone saying, "I see you," without the words. Naomi felt the touch. She did not turn, but something in her shoulders settled very slightly as though a weight had been distributed. Holt saw the gesture. He misread it. He saw it as pressure, as mounting opposition, as the kind of social escalation he could use as justification. He raised his voice to the full authority register, the one that had been trained for PA systems and briefing rooms. "This is a security matter. I need everyone to step back and remain calm. This passenger has been unable to verify her identity and is refusing to comply with crew instructions. We are resolving the situation." She verified, Henderson said flatly. She showed her passport. She showed her card. "I saw it from back here. Sir, I want your name and badge number." Henderson held up his phone. "Right now. You do not have the right to. I am a ticketed first-class passenger being prevented from boarding by a flight delay you are creating. I absolutely have the right to document this." From 4 positions back, Noah's phone was recording. He had not announced it. He was not holding it dramatically aloft. He was simply keeping it pointed in the right direction, steady and quiet, the way he had learned to hold cameras in situations where people act differently when they know they are being filmed. His X-post had now been viewed 11,000 times. Comments were accumulating in real time. She has a valid ticket and he is personally blocking her. Call it what it is. The way she is just standing there, not yelling, not anything, just standing. Who is she? Does anyone know who she is? Webb, standing slightly behind Holt, had looked at his phone for the first time in 5 minutes. He had searched the name on the boarding pass. Rivers Naomi Doctor. Out of a combination of curiosity and a growing uncomfortable feeling he did not have a name for yet. He stared at the search results. His face went the color of old concrete. He looked up at Holt's back. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at his phone again as though checking that what it said was still what it said. It was. He said very quietly to no one in particular, "Doug." Holt did not hear him, or did not choose to. He was in full operational mode now, the place he went when he needed the machinery of authority to carry him past the point where justification had failed. He turned to Webb and said audibly, "Get security down here. I want this escalated to Port Authority." Webb said, "Doug, I need to get security." Webb looked at his phone one more time. Then he keyed his radio with the expression of a man who has decided that what happens next is no longer something he can stop. Naomi had heard everything. She was watching Holt with the attention of someone who is committed to understanding a problem fully before acting on it. She thought he is committed now. He has made this public. He has made it a record. She thought about a locker room at a gym in San Francisco and a boardroom in Memphis and a bank counter in Atlanta when she was 17 years old. She thought about all the places she had been told in the language of procedure and policy and the careful architecture of reasons that were not the real reason that she was not the right person for the space she was standing in. She thought the last time. This is the last time. And she reached into her pocket for her phone. She found it in her memory the way you find things that are always there just below the surface, pressed flat by the years but never gone. She was 17 years old. Atlanta, Georgia. A Saturday morning in October, the particular quality of southern fall light that makes everything look slightly more itself. She had saved $417 over 8 months of tutoring her classmates in mathematics, charging $10 an hour and working 5 days a week after school. She had a goal. A savings account, a start, the first brick of something she intended to build, though she could not have named the whole shape of it yet. She walked into the First National branch on Peachtree Street in the blazer her mother had pressed the night before and the good shoes she saved for church. She was the most prepared 17-year-old in the building. She had her Social Security card, her school ID, her birth certificate, the letter from her mother granting permission for the account, and a cashier's check for $400. She approached the desk. The teller, a woman in her 40s with reading glasses on a chain, looked at the documents. She looked at Naomi. She looked at the documents again. "You will need a parent or guardian present," she said. Naomi had the letter. She held it up. "We prefer in person for minors. The letter is notarized." "I understand. But policy." "I would like to speak to a manager," Naomi said. She was 17. Her voice did not shake. The manager came. He looked at the same documents. He said the same things in different words. He suggested she come back. She sat down. She said she would wait. She waited 47 minutes while the man who had come in behind her, white, same age, wearing a football jersey and carrying a deposit envelope, opened his account in 4 minutes and walked out. Her mother arrived. The account was opened in 6 minutes. On the bus home, her mother held her hand and did not say anything and did not have to. Naomi looked out the window and watched the city go by, and made a decision inside herself that she did not articulate yet because she did not have the words, but that would eventually express itself as a company, a building, a methodology, a life built on the determination to never again require someone else's presence to be taken seriously. That night she borrowed her neighbor's laptop and started learning Python. She was 26, San Francisco. A venture capital firm in a glass building that had the aesthetic of a place that wanted to be taken seriously as a space for serious ideas. She had been invited to pitch. She had prepared for 11 weeks. The deck was 62 slides, the algorithm demonstration was live and clean, the financial projections were conservative enough to be credible and ambitious enough to be interesting. She pitched for 40 minutes. She was good. She knew she was good. The kind of good that happens when you have turned competence into a practice, when you have spent years making something worthy of being seen. At the end, the lead partner, gray at his temples, expensive watch, the manner of someone who had already decided where this was going, looked up from his notes and said with complete naturalness, as though it were a helpful suggestion, "This is impressive work. Can you connect us with the lead developer? I would like to ask some technical questions." Naomi had been standing at the front of the room for 40 minutes. Her name was on the deck. Her biography was on the deck. She was the company. She looked at him. "I am the lead developer," she said. "I wrote the algorithm. I built the projection model. I did the demonstration." He blinked. "Oh." A beat. Of course. Right. He asked no technical questions. She did not get the funding. She flew home to New York that night and sat in her apartment at the kitchen table until 3 in the morning, writing a pricing structure for a new contract she had been putting off closing. She closed it the next morning. It was worth $420,000. It was the contract that funded the next 18 months of River's Logic. 4 years later, that firm came looking for a late-stage investment. They came in person with a prepared deck. She thanked them for their time and passed. In the jet bridge in the fluorescent hum, Naomi came back to the present. Douglas Holt was still standing in front of her. Still certain. Still filling the doorway with all the authority that 31 years and 4 stripes could provide. She had stood in front of tellers and managers and partners and boardrooms and counters and gates. She had stood in front of the architecture of doubt, the meticulous, practiced, procedural architecture of doubt. And she had done it quietly and done it correctly and moved through it or around it or over it. But she was tired of moving around it. She was tired in the particular way that is not exhaustion, but is something deeper. The specific weight of a person who has accommodated the same wrongness enough times to know its exact dimensions and has finally decided that today is the day it accommodates her. She reached into her pocket. She took out her phone. The 2 security officers arrived from the top of the jet bridge at something between a jog and a walk, the pace of people who had been called to a situation and were not yet sure of its category. Officer Reyes was first 40-ish, with a calm, professional face that suggested he had resolved a great many things that looked unresolvable at the outset. His partner, Officer Tran, was younger and hung slightly behind, reading the room as she entered it. They came to a stop between Naomi and Holt. Reyes looked at the scene. The pilot, the woman, the boarding pass still in the woman's hand, the queue behind her, the phones, several of them oriented in the direction of the bottom of the jet bridge. "What is the situation?" he said. Holt pivoted to him with the relief of a man who has been waiting for the cavalry. He began rapidly. The passenger, the verification failure, the refusal to comply, the disruption to the departure schedule. He spoke in the practiced cadence of someone filing a report efficient and certain, and when he was finished, he stood with the posture of a case that has been made. Reyes looked at Naomi. "Ma'am, can I see your documentation?" She handed him her passport and her boarding pass without a word. He looked at the passport. He looked at the boarding pass. He looked at the gate system report on the small scanner at his belt, which showed Rivers, Naomi Doctor, CA 7711A, scanned green, 1854. He said, "Captain, her documents check out. Passport confirms identity. Boarding pass scanned valid at the gate. Scanning valid at the gate does not address my concerns," Holt said. "I have the right to—" "She verified," Rosa Delgado said. She had not meant to say it that loudly, but the jet bridge had a way of carrying sound, and it carried hers. A few people in the queue made low sounds of agreement. "Henderson. I have been standing here for 8 minutes. She has not done anything except hold her ticket and answer questions. At what point does this become something different from a verification issue?" Holt swung toward him. "Sir, this is your final warning. Stay back or you will be escorted from the boarding area." "On what grounds?" Henderson said. "I am a Group 1 passenger. This is my boarding area." Officer Tran put a light hand on Henderson's arm. Not restraining, just redirecting. "Sir, let us handle it." Henderson lowered his voice, but not his intention. "Then handle it." Webb had come to Holt's shoulder. He said very quietly, only for Holt's ear dug. I looked her up. Holt did not look at him. Not now. "Doug." I said not now. Webb stepped back. He had the look of a man standing very close to a fire he did not start, and had just decided he was too close to. Noah's live count was at 22,000 viewers. The comments were running so fast they were barely readable, He said nothing to camera. He just held the phone steady and let the scene speak. Then Holt made the move that changed the geometry of the situation entirely. He looked at Officers Reyes and Tran, and he used a word. "Flag her for TSA review," he said. "I am declaring a potential safety concern." The word safety landed in the tunnel like a match dropped in dry grass. Not because it was true. Because of what invoking it meant. The machinery it engaged, the systems it set in motion, the specific nightmare it threatened for anyone who had learned at some point in their life that safety concern could be a sentence handed down by someone with stripes on their shoulders and no accountability for how they used the words. Naomi heard it. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. Then she opened them, and they were very clear, and she said, "That is the last escalation you are going to make today. Captain." She looked at Officer Reyes. "I am not a safety concern. I am a ticketed first-class passenger with valid documentation who has been blocked from boarding for 9 minutes by a crew member who has been unable to articulate any lawful reason for doing so. I want that on record before anything else happens." Reyes looked at her. He looked at Holt. He had been doing this job for 16 years. He knew the difference between a safety concern and a cover story. He said, "Captain, for the record, what is the specific nature of the safety concern?" Holt said, "My professional assessment." Reyes said, "Can you be more specific?" Holt could not. The silence that followed was the kind that fills a room even when the room is an open tunnel. Rosa Delgado, from her position in the queue, said quietly but audibly, 41 times I have flown this airline. I have never once seen a captain come out personally to block a passenger from boarding. Not once. Until today." Someone behind her said same. Naomi was already unlocking her phone. Noah Castillo's first post had been text and a static frame. His second post, 14 minutes later, was a 12-second clip. It showed in clear handheld footage a pilot in full uniform standing in the entrance of a Boeing 787 with one arm braced against the doorframe. In front of him, a small woman in a Howard University hoodie, perfectly still boarding pass in her right hand, not speaking, not moving, not doing anything that any reasonable definition of the word disruption could accommodate. Caption. Minute 14. She has not moved. He will not let her through. She has a ticket. Valid ID. Valid card. C A771JFK. We are all still standing here. It had 14,000 shares in 11 minutes. Inside the jet bridge, Holt had placed his hand on the aircraft doorframe. Not aggressively, not in a way that the camera could easily call a threat. Just a hand flat against the frame, the physical assertion of a man who had decided that he was the door. Amber Lou was 3 feet inside the galley. She had been standing there in the precise position of someone who is trying to be invisible without moving for the last 6 minutes. She had watched. She had calculated. She had thought about the year she had spent building seniority on this route, about the complaint she had filed 18 months ago that had gone nowhere, about the way Holt had looked at her then and said, "You are new enough to this that you should be careful about the mountains you choose to die on." She had thought, "I cannot afford this." But she had also stood in that galley and watched Naomi Rivers hold a boarding pass for 14 minutes, without flinching, without raising her voice, without performing distress for an audience. And something about that, the absolute, grounded, unassailable stillness of it, had done something to the calculation. She took one step. Just one. Out of the galley. She stood in the doorway, visible, her body no longer tucked behind the frame. She looked at Holt. She said, "Captain. For the record, I need to note that her boarding pass scanned valid, her passport confirms her identity, and her seat has been held since check-in this morning." Holt turned to look at her. The look was long and specific and contained everything that the word consequence can mean between two people in a hierarchy. "Amber," he said, "I will deal with you after this flight." "I understand," she said. She did not move. She did not move back inside. She stayed in the doorway. Holt turned back to the main event. Henderson Park's voice came from the queue. Did he just threaten his own flight attendant for saying the boarding pass was valid? A woman. 3 people behind Henderson said, yes, he did. Noah captured Amber's face in the doorway. He posted a still. The flight attendant just said the ticket scanned valid. The captain just told her he will deal with her after the flight. Shares 21,000 and climbing. Naomi stood in front of the door with the blocked clarity of someone who has assessed every available option and arrived at the one that cannot be avoided. She said to Holt, at a volume that carried to everyone in the tunnel, "I have given you 14 minutes and 5 opportunities to look at a valid boarding pass and step aside. Instead, you have accused me of fraud, suggested a safety concern you cannot define, directed an officer to escalate against a passenger who has done nothing but stand quietly and just threatened your own cabin crew for stating a documented fact." She held his gaze. "I want you to understand something clearly. This is not going to be resolved by you escalating further. It is going to be resolved by a phone call. And after that phone call, the only question is going to be how much of what happened in the last 14 minutes you wish had been different." "Big talk," Holt said. His voice was tight. The armor of his certainty was still on, but it had been on for a long time, and it was showing the strain. "Make your call. I have been at this airline for 31 years. Make your call." "All right," Naomi said. She dialed. The phone rang once, twice. The jet bridge was so quiet that the sound of the ringtone was audible. Rosa Delgado had closed her book. Henderson had his phone down. Even Diane Prescott, who had retreated 4 people back in the queue when the mood shifted when the numbers on Noah's phone became visible to the people near him, had gone still. Nobody spoke. The call connected. Operations Control. Director Walsh. The voice came through the phone speaker. Strong and clear, that particular quality of voice that belongs to someone accustomed to being the calmest person in a room full of crises. Naomi said, "Director Walsh. This is Naomi Rivers. Authorization code Alpha Delta 77. I have a situation at Gate C12 JFK that requires your immediate attention involving a Captain Douglas Holt." The silence that followed was half a second long and contained approximately the weight of 30 years of professional certainty collapsing, because Douglas Holt knew that code. He had seen it once in a training memo flagged in red at the top of the document. Alpha Delta 77 Owner-Level Executive Override, to be invoked only by the majority shareholder or acting CEO. Absolute authority. He had read that memo. He had filed it away. He had never expected to hear those words spoken out loud in his jet bridge by a woman in a Howard University hoodie who he had decided 14 minutes ago did not belong on his aircraft. His hand on the doorframe went very still. "Before we find out what happens next, I need to stop for 1 second. Because if you were standing in that jet bridge right now watching all of this unfold, watching this woman stand perfectly still for 14 minutes while a man with 4 stripes on his shoulders tries everything he has to move her, what would you do? Would you have spoken up the way Henderson did? Would you have stayed quiet, the way Webb did? Would you have taken that 1 step out of the galley like Amber? Drop your answer in the comments. Seriously. I want to know. This is the kind of moment that tells you something about yourself when you imagine being in it. And if this story is hitting you somewhere real, if you have ever been the person standing in that jet bridge with a valid ticket and someone deciding your documentation just is not enough, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second and it means everything. Now, Director Walsh is on the line. And Douglas Holt is beginning to understand that he has made a very, very expensive mistake. Let us see what it costs him. The speakerphone was on. Naomi had not made a show of it. She had simply held the phone where it could be heard in the natural way of someone who wants a conversation to be part of the record. The sound of Director Walsh's voice filled the jet bridge the way a clear announcement fills a terminal, cutting through ambient noise and landing cleanly in every ear. Dr. Rivers. Walsh's voice changed when he said the name, not deferential but focused in the way of someone who has been waiting for a specific conversation and recognizes it when it arrives. I see the flag in the system. What do you need? I need you to clarify my current status with this airline for Captain Holt, who is standing in front of me. A pause. On his end, Walsh was looking at a screen that had flagged the ownership transfer 2.5 hours ago. He had been watching for this moment. He had not expected it to arrive from a jet bridge, Captain Holt Walsh said. The name landed in the tunnel. Holt's jaw tightened. You are speaking with Dr. Naomi Rivers. As of 1400 hours today, she is the majority shareholder and acting chief executive officer of Callaway Atlantic Airways. The authorization code she provided, Alpha Delta 77, is verified, active, and absolute. Her authority on matters of company policy and personnel is primary. You are directed to stand down immediately and allow her to board. The jet bridge was very quiet. Not the quiet of an empty space, the quiet of 31 people who have stopped breathing at roughly the same moment. Henderson Park looked at the man beside him, who looked back. Neither of them said anything. Rosa Delgado stood with both hands on her book and her eyes forward. Amber in the galley doorway put her hand over her mouth. Not to cover a sound, just because her hand needed somewhere to go. Noah's phone was recording. His live count had just crossed 40,000. The comments were rolling faster than anyone could read. She owns the airline. Wait. I need someone to explain what I'm watching right now. Webb looked at his own phone, then at Holt's back. He said for the second time in 10 minutes very quietly, Doug. Holt did not look at him. He was looking at Naomi. The expression on his face was doing something complicated. The specific work of a man whose world has been reorganized around him and whose brain is still trying to run on the old map. His eyes moved from her to the phone, to the gold stripes on his own shoulder, and back to her. This is a prank, he said. It was almost private, the kind of statement a person makes to themselves while they are still hoping. Naomi looked at him with complete patience. She held the phone up slightly so Walsh could hear what was being said. Walsh heard it. Captain Holt. Walsh's voice had dropped the explanatory tone. What remained was direct and flat. I am looking at the acquisition filing in our system right now. The documentation is executed and recorded. This is not a prank. This is not a test you can elect not to participate in. The woman in front of you owns the aircraft you are standing in. A pause. Stand down. Now. Holt's hand was still on the doorframe. Something in him, the 31 years of it, the accumulated weight of being the authority, the final word, the captain, refused to release. He looked at Naomi. He looked at the phone. He looked at the passengers behind her. Then he looked at Amber, who had not moved back inside. Then he said, with all the defiance of a man standing in a room that is already emptied, "This does not change my assessment." Naomi put the phone down, not ending the call, just lowering it to her side. "I know," she said. "That is why I am not asking for your assessment anymore." Walsh did not stop. He had been doing this job for 19 years. He had seen pilots in crisis mechanical emergencies at altitude weather decisions that cost companies millions, crew conflicts that ended careers. He had a particular tone for moments when something had already gone past the point of soft management and needed to be named for what it was. He used it now. Captain Holt Walsh said through the phone, his voice carrying in the tunnel's acoustics like it was coming from everywhere. I want to be very specific with you. The ownership transfer was executed and filed at 1400 hours today. The document is in our system, has been verified by our legal department, and has been reported to the FAA registry. This is not a rumor. It is not a test. It is not a prank. The woman you have been blocking for the last 16 minutes owns the company you work for. He paused. Or worked for. Depending on what you do in the next 30 seconds. Holt's grip on the doorframe had not loosened. Webb moved to Holt's shoulder, not beside him but close enough to be private, and said urgently and low, Doug. I looked her up. Rivers Logic, 6.8 billion valuation. The acquisition was on the Bloomberg wire this afternoon. She is real. She is exactly who Walsh is saying she is. Holt turned his head just enough to look at Webb. Webb had the expression of someone who has recognized the edge of a cliff and is trying to stop someone who is still walking. She is real, Webb said again. Something moved across Holt's face. For one moment, one brief, exposed moment, the certainty cracked, and underneath it was the face of a man who has understood something and cannot accept it, because accepting it would require dismantling everything he has been certain of for 31 years. Then the certainty closed back over it. He turned back to Naomi. Even if what you are claiming is true, he said, and the even if contained entire volumes of a man refusing to concede my responsibility under FAA Federal Aviation Regulation. Part 121 is the safety of this aircraft and its passengers. I have identified a concern. That authority does not transfer to a corporate title. Naomi looked at him the way you look at a lock you have just been handed the key to. Director Walsh, she said, holding the phone up. Are you still there? Still here. Please log this conversation as part of the incident record for CA 771, gate C12J FK October 14th. Already logging. She lowered the phone. She looked at Holt. Henderson Park, from 5 feet back, said in a clear voice, He just refused a direct instruction from his CEO and hid behind safety regulations. That is on record now. A woman, 2 people behind Henderson, said, And it is on video. Holt heard those words. He heard the word video, and something in his peripheral vision registered what it had been registering for the last 10 minutes. Noah's phone, chest height, steady, pointed directly at him. He turned toward Noah. You need to turn that off. Recording in the sterile area is a security. I am on the public side of the sterile area, Noah said calmly. The jet bridge is classified as a public access boarding zone under TSA guidelines. But thank you for the clarification on camera. He held the phone a fraction higher. His viewer count was at 53,000 and accelerating. Amber Lou stepped fully out of the galley and stood at the aircraft entrance. Not beside Holt, not opposing him, simply present and visible. She said, Captain Holt, I have worked this route with you for 6 years. I have never spoken against a crew decision in 6 years. She stopped. She seemed to be deciding something. I am speaking now. Her boarding pass is valid. Her identity is confirmed. Her seat is ready. There is no safety concern. There is no policy violation. There is no reason for this. Holt looked at her. 6 years. She had worked beside him for 6 years, and he had believed on some level that she was an extension of his own authority, that she saw what he saw and felt what he felt, and would stay quiet when he needed her to stay quiet. He had been wrong. She was looking at him with the expression of someone who has decided that being right is worth more than being safe. It was the expression he had threatened out of her 18 months ago, and it was back, and it was not going away. He opened his mouth. Rosa Delgado said from the queue in the clear, unhurried voice of someone who has nothing to lose, young man. Every person in this tunnel has now heard the director of this airline confirm who she is. every person. You are the only one in this tunnel who is still pretending you have not." She said it gently. That was the thing. She did not need to say it hard. The jet bridge went quiet in the way that things go quiet when the truth has just been said plainly in a small room. Holt stood in the doorway with his hand on the frame and the full weight of 53,000 witnesses on a phone 4 feet away from his face, and for the first time in 16 minutes, he had nothing to say. He found something to say. He always found something to say. It came from the deepest part of what he was. The part that had been formed so long ago by so many accumulated confirmations that the world worked the way he believed it worked, that even now, standing in the fluorescent light of his own unraveling, it could produce language. "I do not care what the director says," Holt said. "I do not care what the wire transfer says. I have been flying this route for 11 years. I have maintained a record that any pilot in this company would—" Douglas. Webb's voice. Quiet. Final. The voice of a man who has been watching a train approach for 20 minutes and has finally decided not to be on the tracks. Holt did not stop. He turned to the security officers. "I am invoking captain's authority under FAR 121.533. The boarding of this passenger is suspended pending my assessment. That is my right under federal aviation. Captain." Reyes's voice had the tone he reserved for people who were no longer helping themselves. "The director of operations has confirmed her identity and authority. We cannot act against that on your assessment alone. She could have bought that code." "Sir, Reyes, flat. Finished with the detours." Holt looked at Naomi. She was standing exactly where she had been standing for the last 17 minutes. Same position, same stillness. She had not moved in any direction since the conversation began. Her boarding pass was in her right hand. Her phone was at her side. Her face was doing what it had been doing the entire time. Not anger, not triumph, not performance of any kind. Just presence. Just the absolute unbudgeable fact of her. He looked at her, and for 1 second Douglas Holt saw it. Saw what was happening. Saw the camera. Saw the 53,000 people watching. Saw his union card, and his license, and his 31 years, and his 4 gold stripes in the exact configuration they would be in right before they stopped being his. And his ego, which had survived 31 years without a true reckoning, made one final, terrible decision. It decided to go down swinging. "A woman dressed like you," he said. Loud. Loud enough for everyone. Loud enough for Noah's microphone. Loud enough for the 53,000, and then the 200,000, and then the 4 million. Does not walk onto my first-class cabin without a full verification protocol. Whatever you claim to have bought, whatever code you claim to have. Henderson Park said, cutting through everything he said, "Dressed like you." Everyone in this bridge just heard that. Rosa put her hand over her heart. Amber closed her eyes. Noah looked at his phone. He looked at the caption he was typing. He typed it. He posted it. "A woman dressed like you." Those were his exact words. She has a valid ticket, a valid passport, a valid card, a verified executive code, and the director of operations on the phone. He said, "Dressed like you. This is Callaway Atlantic. Flight CA 771, Jet Bridge JFK." He posted it. Within 4 minutes, it had 30,000 shares. Within 7 minutes, the Callaway Atlantic Media Monitoring System flagged it as a Tier 1 reputation event. Holt seemed to feel the weight of what he had said the moment after he said it. He looked at the queue, at the phones, at the faces, at the particular expression of 30 people who have just witnessed something they will describe for years. He said, "That is not what I meant." Naomi looked at him. "Then what did you mean?" He had no answer. He had not had one for several minutes. What he had was momentum and stubbornness and the last 12% of the certainty that had carried him this far. He looked at Officers Reyes and Tron. "Remove her," he said. Reyes said, "Sir, we cannot do that. I am the captain." "You were," Naomi said. The words were hung in the tunnel, not shouted, not triumphant, said in the tone of a correction, the same tone she would use to clarify a data point in a board presentation. Quiet, precise, certain. Holt looked at her. She looked back. "Captain Holt," Naomi said, and the jet bridge was so quiet that every person in it could hear her clearly. "I have a PhD in applied mathematics. I built a $6.8 billion company from a single algorithm. I have been standing in this tunnel for 17 minutes with every document you could have asked for. And the reason you are still blocking this door has nothing to do with safety and nothing to do with policy." She paused. "I think you know what it has to do with." She reached past him, not touching him, and pressed the call button on her phone. "Director Walsh, please initiate emergency crew replacement for CA-771 and patch me through to the compliance officer." Walsh. Already initiated. Officers Miller and Santos came down the jet bridge at a deliberate pace, not running but purposeful, the specific momentum of Port Authority officers who have been told there is a situation and have learned not to categorize situations until they have seen them. They were experienced readers of rooms. The room they entered was a narrow tunnel with 32 people in it, and the geometry told them most of the story before anyone opened their mouths. At the front, a large pilot in full uniform, high color in his face, one hand still grazing the doorframe as though he might need it. His first officer behind him, arms crossed, looking at the ground. A flight attendant standing in a galley doorway, hands clasped, watching. And in the center, a small woman in a hoodie, standing in a position of absolute stillness, boarding pass in one hand, phone in the other, not distressed, not escalated, looking at the pilot the way someone looks at a problem they have already solved and are waiting for the solution to propagate. Miller did what he always did. He looked at the person who was the most calm and addressed the situation to them. "What is the situation?" he said to the air between them. Holt moved to fill the gap. He gave his version quickly. The refusal to comply, the unverified identity, the disruption to departure, the safety concern he had been unable to define but had not stopped mentioning. He had the compressed efficiency of someone who has told a story enough times in the last 20 minutes to have refined it. When he finished, Miller looked at Naomi. She held out her phone. Miller took it. He heard Walsh's voice on the line, and Walsh's voice told him in 45 seconds everything he needed to know. When Miller handed the phone back, he turned to Holt. He said, "Sir, the Director of Operations has confirmed her identity and authority. She is the acting CEO of this airline. She is authorized to be in this space. She is authorized to board." Holt said, "The Director does not have the right to override, Captain." Miller's voice lowered into the register he used for people who were not helping themselves. "I need you to hear what I am telling you." Santos, quieter than Miller, said to Holt, "Can I ask, why were you in the jet bridge to begin with? Boarding procedures are managed by gate agents." The question was not aggressive. It was the kind of question that seems simple and is not. Nobody had an answer. Webb looked at the floor. Amber looked at the wall. Holt opened his mouth and closed it. Henderson Park said to no one in particular, but loudly, "Great question." Noah captioned it. Port Authority just asked why the captain was personally in the jet bridge to block boarding. Nobody has answered. Holt tried to recover. "My responsibility includes the entirety of the boarding process when I identify a concern," Sir Santos said. "I am going to ask you to step back from the aircraft entrance." Holt did not step back. His hand found the doorframe again. And then, in the manner of a man who has decided that he can still salvage something from this, that he still has one card to play, he made the move that made everything worse. He raised his voice, not to the tunnel, but to Miller directly. Loud. Official. I am filing a formal report of impersonation and obstruction of a flight officer. I want this woman detained for questioning. She has provided a code she should not have access to. She has interfered with my authority as captain, and I am prepared to testify to all of it." Miller looked at him for a long moment, looked at Naomi, looked at the phone Walsh was still on, looked at Noah's camera, which had been pointing at Holt for the last 19 minutes. He said, "Sir, I am going to need you to step away from the aircraft entrance. I am the captain." "Sir," Naomi said quietly without looking away from Holt Director Walsh, "please confirm for Officers Miller and Santos that I have the authority under Callaway Atlantic Company Bylaw Section 4, Article 9, to suspend a crew member for conduct detrimental to the company's operational integrity." Walsh confirmed. "That authority is yours." Naomi said to Miller, "I would like to invoke that authority now." Miller looked at Holt. He had dealt with men like Douglas Holt before. Not pilots specifically, but men who had operated so long without consequence that they had stopped being able to recognize the end when it came. He felt no particular pleasure in what was happening, but he felt no ambiguity either. He said, "Captain, I am going to need you to step aside." Holt said, "I am not going anywhere." Miller said, "Sir." Holt grabbed the doorframe with both hands. Naomi took one step forward. She was 5'4" in worn white sneakers, and Douglas Holt was 6'1" in a pressed uniform with 4 gold stripes that caught the light, and none of that math was relevant anymore. She had long since understood that authority is not about size. It is about the clarity of the ground you stand on. Her ground was clear. She looked at him. Not up at him, but at him, the distinction mattering. And she said, "Douglas Holt. Callaway Atlantic Company, Bylaw Section 4, Article 9. The majority shareholder and acting chief executive officer reserves the right to suspend any crew member deemed unfit for duty due to conduct detrimental to the company's operational integrity or public reputation. This right may be invoked verbally in emergency situations." She paused. "This is an emergency situation." Another pause. Shorter. "You are grounded effective immediately." Holt laughed. It was not a good sound, the specific register of a man whose brain is still running on an old program, trying to produce confidence in a body that is running out of it. "You cannot ground me. You are standing in my jet bridge in a hoodie. I have 31 years on this route." "Then you should have known better," Naomi said. She turned to Miller. "This man is no longer the captain of this aircraft. He is now a civilian refusing to vacate private property after a direct instruction from the property's owner. I would like him removed." Miller looked at Holt. Santos moved to the left, completing the flank. The math was simple. They moved. Holt's grip on the doorframe tightened. "Do not touch me. Do you know how long I have served this company? 31 years. I have taken this route to London more times than you have. Doug." Webb's voice from behind. The voice of someone who has been watching a train approach for 20 minutes and has finally decided not to be on the tracks. "Let go of the door." Holt turned to look at him. Webb met his eyes. And Webb said the thing he should have said 17 minutes ago. Said it quietly and directly and without apology. She is right. "Let go." Something went out of Holt's face. Not anger. Anger was still there. What went out was the last of the certainty. The framework. The thing he had been standing inside of for so long, he had stopped seeing it as a framework and started seeing it as the world. He let go of the doorframe. Miller and Santos moved him back, gently, professionally, in the manner of people doing an unpleasant thing with competence. Holt walked with them, not dragged, not cuffed, simply moved, back up the jet bridge past the passengers. They watched him go. Henderson Park said nothing. He did not need to. Rosa Delgado watched him pass with an expression that was not triumph and not pity. Something more honest than either the look of someone who has seen this story before and has waited a long time to see it end differently. Noah lowered his phone. He had captured it all. But somehow, in this specific moment, the camera felt like the wrong instrument. He put it in his pocket. Holt reached Naomi as he passed. He stopped. For one moment, he looked at her. Really looked the way he had refused to look at the boarding pass, the passport, the card, the authorization code. He said, "You will regret this." Naomi said, "No, Douglas, you will." Not cruelly, not triumphantly, in the same tone she had used for the entire conversation. The voice of someone reading a data point. He walked past her, up the ramp, gone. The jet bridge was quiet. Then from somewhere in the queue, a sound. Not applause, not cheering, not a performance. Just someone exhaling. Someone who had been holding their breath for 20 minutes without knowing it. Then another. Naomi turned to Amber Lou, who was standing in the galley doorway with her hands clasped and her face doing complex work. "We need a replacement, Captain," Naomi said. "Contact crew scheduling. Reserve captain as soon as possible. I want wheels up within the hour." "Yes, ma'am." Amber reached for her radio. Her hands were steadier than she had expected them to be. Naomi turned to the queue. "I apologize for the delay. We will be boarding in a few minutes." She looked at the faces. Henderson, Rosa, Noah, the others. 30 people who had stood in a tunnel and each in their own way at their own cost stayed honest. "Thank you," she said for staying. She stepped onto the plane. She turned left. Seat 1A. The first-class cabin of the Callaway Atlantic Boeing 787 Dreamliner had 8 seats arranged in the configuration of a very expensive kind of solitude. Wide pods with fold-flat beds, privacy dividers, window seats that looked out onto the tarmac below. The lighting was warm and low. The seats were upholstered in gray that was trying to be charcoal. It was a nice cabin. Naomi had seen nicer, and she had seen the financial reports that explained why this one had not been updated in 4 years. She would deal with that later. She put her backpack in the overhead compartment, sat down in 1A, and looked out the window. The tarmac. The service vehicles making their slow, purposeful circuits. The last light of the evening fading at the edge of the sky behind the JFK perimeter road. A plane banking on its approach to a parallel runway, nav lights blinking in the gathering dark. 35 seconds after she sat down, Amber Lou appeared beside her. She was not carrying champagne or the standard welcome beverage. She was carrying a glass of sparkling water with no ice. She set it down on the seat console without being asked. "How did you know?" Naomi said. "Passenger preference note in the manifest," Amber said. "The booking system pulled it from your previous flights. I saw it when I reviewed the passenger list this morning." She paused. "I knew who you were before we boarded." Naomi looked at her. Amber continued. "I recognized the executive override tag. I have only seen it once before in training. I knew what it meant. And I—" She stopped, started again. "I did not say anything. Not when I should have." Naomi was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You said it when you needed to." "That is not nothing. It should have been sooner." "Yes," Naomi said, "it should have been. But you said it. That matters." Amber was quiet. Naomi looked at her. Really looked the way she had been looking at things all afternoon, with the attention of someone taking an accurate inventory. "I am creating a new position," Naomi said. "Lead cabin operations trainer, company-wide. It is going to involve working with every crew cohort on a protocol I am calling When Policy and Conscience Conflict. I need someone who understands both sides of that conflict from the inside." She paused. "I want it to be you. We will talk details on the ground." Amber opened her mouth, closed it. "That is not a reward," Naomi said. "It is an assignment. It will be harder than what you are doing now." "I understand." Amber said. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Naomi said, and meant it in the way she meant things, simply directly without performance. Amber left. She had a replacement captain to brief a cabin crew to settle, and for the first time in a long time a reason to walk the length of a plane feeling like herself. The other passengers boarded. Henderson Park came through first. He stopped at 1A and looked at Naomi for a moment. He did not say anything profound. He said good flight and nodded and continued to 2C. Rosa Delgado paused as she passed. She was the one who spoke. I have flown this airline 41 times, she said. I will fly it 41 more. It was the best review Naomi had ever received. Noah Castillo took his seat in row 4. He did not film. He put his camera in his bag and looked at the seatback display and thought about what he had watched and how it would land when people saw it and what it meant that he had been there to see it at all. Diane Prescott did not board. She had turned around somewhere near the top of the jet bridge and gone back to request a rebooking. Nobody stopped her. Nobody particularly noticed she was gone. At some point, the boarding door closed. At some point, the engines began to spool up. That low-growing vibration that means the Earth is about to become a temporary condition. Naomi looked out the window and watched JFK begin to fall away below her. The Atlantic at 38,000 feet at 2 in the morning is not a view so much as an absence, an absolute darkness below and a field of stars above that have no competition from light below. The cabin was quiet. Most passengers were horizontal in their pods, the fold flatbeds doing what they were designed to do. Naomi was not sleeping. She had her laptop open and had been working through the first phase of what she already thought of as the Callaway audit, a preliminary review of the complaint database that Walsh had given her access to before departure. She had been working for 90 minutes when Amber appeared beside her with the particular expression of someone who has been weighing whether to interrupt and has decided they have to. Something is happening, Amber said. She held out her tablet. The screen showed a website Naomi recognized, a news aggregator that specialized in populist opinion content, the kind that favored certain narratives and framed them in the language of victimhood and retribution. The headline read, Hero Pilot, Fired by Woke Billionaire. Captain Douglas Holt speaks exclusively. Below it, a video. Holt, in the back of a police vehicle, still in his uniform, still with 4 gold stripes that had not yet been removed, because that process takes longer than an evening. He was composed. He had found his voice again, the professional voice, the captain's voice. I was performing my duty. This passenger was erratic and non-compliant. I followed procedure. What happened to me tonight is what happens when someone with money decides the rules do not apply to them. Amber scrolled down. More clips. Editorials spinning up in real time. Comments dividing into camps, some of them ugly. One headline, Callaway Atlantic, CEO, Abuses, Power to Silence, Safety Concerns. Another, Is Naomi Rivers the new face of corporate overreach? Naomi read it all. She read it with the calm attention of someone analyzing a data set. Noah Castillo appeared from row 4. He had been awake. He is trying to flip the narrative, Noah said quietly. He called in a favor with someone who has a platform. He is framing your video as the aggression. He does not know what I have, Naomi said. What do you have? She turned her laptop so Amber and Noah could see the screen. It showed a folder. Inside the folder, a video file timestamp 1841 source designation JFK-T5-C12-tunnel-cam-B. High definition. Clear audio. Callaway Atlantic upgraded the jet bridge security systems 3 months ago, Naomi said. New HD audio-visual recorders. Liability upgrade. It was in the memo sent to all senior crew in August. She looked at Amber. Amber said Holt signed the acknowledgement. All senior crew did, so he knew he was being recorded. Yes. Naomi looked back at the screen. He signed the memo, and then he forgot about it, because in 31 years nobody has ever made him look at what the cameras see. She opened the file. She played 10 seconds of it. The jet bridge, the audio crystal clear, Holt's voice carrying perfectly in the tunnel's acoustics. A woman dressed like you does not walk onto my first-class cabin. She closed the file. He wants a media war, she said. He chose the wrong person for it. She opened the Callaway Atlantic administrative portal on a second window. She had admin access. She had had it since 14:03 that afternoon. She navigated to the company's official X account. She uploaded the full security footage, unedited. No caption except Callaway Atlantic believes in transparency. The following is unedited security footage from Gate C-12, JFK, October 14th. We have no additional comment at this time. N. Rivers, acting CEO. She posted it. She looked at Amber. Go get some rest. You have a long day tomorrow. Amber went. Noah said, That is going to change everything. Yes, Naomi said. That is the idea. She picked up her sparkling water. She looked out the window at the dark Atlantic below. 8 hours ago, she had been signing acquisition documents in a boardroom that smelled of recycled air and nervous ambition. 4 hours ago, she had been standing in a jet bridge being told she did not belong. Now she was in seat 1. Flying over the ocean, she had bought a piece of this afternoon, watching the counter-narrative she had just detonated begin to spread across the internet at the speed of evidence. She did not feel triumphant. She felt clear. She felt the specific clarity of someone who has been carrying a weight for a very long time and has finally put it down, not by surrendering it, but by building something strong enough to set it on. She went back to the audit. The reaction to the unedited footage was not immediate in the way that splashy things are immediate. It did not detonate in a single explosion of viral attention. It spread the way a tide comes in quietly, steadily, and with an inevitability that becomes obvious only in retrospect. The first 1,000 views came from the passengers on the plane and from the people in their networks who had already been following Noah's posts, who saw the company's own account post the footage and understood immediately what it meant. Within 20 minutes, 40,000 views. Within an hour, 200,000. At the 2-hour mark, the original headline about the hero pilot was still circulating. But now it was circulating side by side with the security footage in a split-screen comparison being made organically by thousands of people with no coordination from Naomi's team. Holt's version: she was aggressive and non-compliant. The footage, a woman standing perfectly still, boarding pass in hand, answering every question, declining to raise her voice and doing so for 19 minutes. The footage won. Comments that had been split became lopsided. I thought the billionaire was the problem. I watched the footage. She did not do anything. He just did not want her there. A woman dressed like you. That is in the audio. You can hear it clearly. There is no other reading. As a pilot of 22 years, what I see in that footage is not a safety assessment. It is something else entirely, and we should call it what it is. The pilot union, which had issued a cautious statement of support for Holt in the first hour after the incident before the footage was released, went quiet. Then at 4 a.m. London time, a brief statement from the union's duty officer appeared on their website. The relevant portion: the union exists to protect pilots whose rights have been violated. It does not exist to shield conduct that violates the rights of others. Having reviewed the footage released this evening by Callaway Atlantic, the union has determined that it cannot, in good standing, provide representation in this matter. Captain Holt will need to secure independent counsel. Naomi read the statement in the air in seat 1A in the blue light of her laptop screen with 3 hours of ocean still beneath her. She read it twice. Then she sent Walsh a text: log the union statement as part of the incident documentation. Walsh responded in 4 minutes. Already done. Also, 6 former Callaway passengers have reached out in the last hour saying they experienced similar situations on this route. I am compiling them. She wrote back, "Keep compiling." Noah Castillo was not asleep. He was in row 4 with his phone on his knee watching the view count tick. He had not posted again after the footage went up. He felt in some way he would later try to explain to his audience that the story was no longer his to tell. It had its own momentum now. It was going where it needed to go. He looked toward the front of the cabin. Seat 1. The privacy divider raised a narrow rim of blue laptop light visible above the edge. He thought about what he had watched in that jet bridge. He got out his notebook, a physical one, spiral-bound, slightly battered, and he wrote for 20 minutes. Not for the channel, just for himself. At the front of the plane, Amber Lou came through the cabin on a routine check and paused for a fraction of a second at 1A's privacy divider. On the other side of it, fingers on a keyboard, working, the way people work when they have come to something they have been building toward for a long time and finally have the room to build it. Amber continued through the cabin. She checked on Rosa Delgado asleep with her book on her lap, the pages curved back to a chapter she had not finished. She checked on Henderson Park, who was awake and reading, and nodded at her with the particular nod of a man who has seen something today that has recalibrated something in him and is still processing what. She turned off one overhead light that a sleeping passenger had left on. She went back to the galley. She got out the module outline she had been half-drafting in her head for the last 2 years. The one about what crew members are supposed to do when following orders means ignoring something wrong. The one that had no home, no framework, no institutional support. She wrote the title at the top of the napkin she had in her hand, When Policy and Conscience Conflict. Below it, she wrote the first line. This is not about disobeying. It is about knowing the difference between a rule and an excuse. The plane flew east. The footage spread. Outside the windows, the Atlantic gave way slowly to the first faint smudge of pre-dawn gray along the horizon line. The edge of Europe arriving the way it always does on transatlantic crossings, like an answer you knew was coming. Captain Davies' voice came over the intercom with the particular tightness of a man who has been pulled from his dinner to fly an 8-hour transatlantic route and has since been briefed on exactly who is sitting in seat 1A. Ladies and gentlemen, flight attendants, we are beginning our descent into London Heathrow. Local time is 7:14 in the morning, temperature a cool 11 degrees Celsius. We anticipate a smooth approach and landing in approximately 30 minutes. A pause. A slight clearing of his throat. The station has advised that there is significant media presence at the gate this morning. Passengers are asked to remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop and crew have confirmed the all clear. We appreciate your patience and thank you for flying Callaway Atlantic. Henderson Park, who had been reading and now was not, leaned across the aisle. CNN, he said. My wife has been texting me for the last hour. She said Holt is the most talked about person on aviation news since the runway collision in 2019. He paused. She also said his union dropped him. I know, Naomi said. Is that unusual? The union dropping someone that fast for conduct, this clear and evidence this available. She looked at him. It is the only rational move. They protect members. He has become a liability. She paused. He did that himself. Henderson was quiet for a moment. Then, what happens to the airline? Long term. We fix it, she said simply. Start with the culture, then the cabins, then the routes. She looked out the window as the coast of England came into view, green and gray and dense with the particular texture of a country that has been itself for a very long time. In that order, culture first. Henderson nodded slowly. Good luck, he said and meant it. From row 4, Noah looked out his window at Heathrow expanding below, the runways laid out in their precise geometry, the terminal buildings, the satellite media trucks just barely visible at the periphery of the international gates, their dishes extended. He thought I was in the right place, not for the content, for the experience of watching a specific kind of person hold a specific kind of ground under a specific kind of pressure, and not move and not become anything other than what she was. Rosa Delgado had been awake for the last 20 minutes. She felt the descent in her ears, and she looked out her window at England coming up below, and she thought about her daughter in London and her grandchildren and the small, ordinary miracle of arriving. When the wheels touch down with the familiar shudder and deceleration that always, regardless of how many times you have felt it, has an element of relief. She closed her book and held it in her lap. She thought 42 times now. Amber came through the cabin. Her face was composed. Her posture was straight. She moved through the space of her aircraft with the specific quality of someone who has finally, on this particular morning, decided to occupy it fully. She reached seat 1A. Dr. Rivers, we have landed. Naomi looked up from her laptop. She looked out the window at the gray English morning pressing against the glass. Yes, she said. We have. The Mercedes was black and quiet and moved through the morning traffic of the M4 with the ease of a car that knows how to get out of its own way. Naomi sat in the back with her phone in her hand and London rising around her. The density of it, the particular way the city announces itself as you come in from the west, layered and gray and alive under an early October sky that could not decide between rain and overcast. Marcus called first. His voice had the tone it took on when he was reading from notes, which meant he had been awake for most of the night. FAA has opened a formal inquiry into Holt's conduct. License suspended pending review. They moved fast on that because the footage is public and unambiguous. The union has formally withdrawn representation. And Naomi. He has been calling Carla's line every 30 minutes since landing. Carla, Naomi said. Carla Okonkwo. Yes, ma'am. 17 calls. He left voicemails. Some of them are not okay. Naomi. Save them all. Do you want to? I will call him. A longer pause. Are you sure? There are things he needs to hear, she said, and things I need him to hear me say. She dialed. He picked up on the first ring, which meant he had been watching his phone. The voice that answered was not the captain's voice. The captain's voice had been built over 31 years of training and command, and the practiced authority of someone who runs things. What came back at her was something older and rawer underneath that. A man who had spent the night watching himself become the most recognizable cautionary tale in aviation. You destroyed me, he said. Naomi looked out at the Hammersmith flyover. Good morning, Douglas. Do not. A pause. Heavy breathing. There are news vans on my street. My neighbors are filming my house. My wife called me at 2 a.m, and I did not know what to say to her. A pause. You did this. You were recorded on your own airline security system saying the words that are now on 4 million screens, Naomi said. I did not say those words, Douglas. You did. I was doing my job. You were deciding who belongs somewhere based on what they were wearing. Those are not the same thing. He made a sound that was not a word. The union dropped you, she said. That happened before I was even on the ground. They watched the footage and made their own assessment. I did not call them. I have 31 years. 7 complaints in the last decade, Naomi said. 4 from passengers, 3 from junior crew, all closed without action by people who had reasons to close them without action that are no longer going to be the way this company operates. She paused. Walsh has been compiling additional reports since midnight. The number is growing. Silence. The union cannot help you, she continued. and the lawyers you have contacted have either declined or are going to decline because the footage is unedited and the audio is clear, and there is no version of this that a reasonable person watches and concludes that you were performing a safety function. She let that sit. What you did was decide in under 3 seconds that I did not belong in first class, and then you spent 19 minutes building a procedural structure around that decision. That structure is visible in the footage. It is visible to everyone. A long pause. Then Holt said, and his voice was different now. Not the raw wound of the first minutes, but something quieter and more calculated, the voice of a man trying to find the last angle. My pension. I was 2 years away. Whatever you think about what I did, I earned that pension. You cannot take that. Your pension is subject to the morality clause in your contract, Naomi said. That will be adjudicated separately, and I am not involved in that process. It is in the hands of the compliance department and whatever legal representation you are able to secure. A pause. He was listening now. But there is something else, she said. She looked out the window. They were crossing the Thames now. She could see the river below, dark and wide, the morning light not yet reaching the water. The Executive Aviator Finance Program, she said. You financed a Piper Comanche through the Airline in 2019. Tail number November 338, Charlie Alpha. Outstanding balance of $287,000. Dead silence. Do not, Holt said. The single word had all the quality of a man watching something he loves move toward the edge of a table. Clause 12. Section C of the program agreement, Naomi said. Gross misconduct resulting in public reputational damage to the airline triggers immediate recall of the outstanding loan balance. I do not have that kind of money, which activates the asset recovery provision. My legal team filed the paperwork at 4 a.m. There is a sheriff's deputy at the hangar now. A sound came from his end that was not a word. Low, involuntary, the sound of something essential being removed. You restored that plane yourself, Naomi said. It was not a question. She had read the posts. She had seen the photos. Holt in a hanger sleeves rolled up working on the engine, the pride in every image. You flew it on weekends. You polished it yourself. That plane is my life, he said. The bravado was gone. It is all I have left. Naomi was quiet for a moment. What are we going to do with it? She said. Not cruelly, as a genuine statement of what she had decided. Please, he said. Just that. The N338 Initiative, she said. It is the name we have given the nonprofit we are establishing to train young women of color to fly. We need planes. Yours will be the first. We are repainting it, keeping the colors, changing the tail number to N338. She paused. The first cohort of students will learn to fly in the plane you built with your hands. I thought you should know that. On the other end, silence. Then a sound that was not quite crying and was not quite not crying. The sound of a man sitting in the debris of a certainty he had held so long he had forgotten it was a choice. Why, he said, finally. His voice was very small. Why are you doing all of this? I made a judgment call. I was wrong. I can admit I was wrong. But why? Because Naomi said you did not just block a passenger. You did what you did because it had always worked before. Because the architecture around you had always held you up when you did it. Because 7 complaints went nowhere and 31 years passed and nobody ever showed you the full cost of what you were doing. She paused. I am showing you now. She looked at the river below, at London waking up around her. You needed to understand, she said, that the world you were certain of was never as solid as you thought, and the people you were certain did not belong in it were always going to outlast your certainty. She looked at her phone. Goodbye, Douglas. She ended the call. She sat in the silence of the car for a long moment, Then she typed a text to Carla N338, initiative paperwork. Push through today. Also schedule a call with Sofia Navarro at JFK. I want to talk to her this week. Carla responded. On it. The Dorchester is ready. Your board meeting is at 10. The car stopped at the hotel entrance. Naomi stepped out into the London morning, cool and damp and smelling of rain that had just finished. The doorman opened the door without looking at her hoodie. He looked at her face. He saw what was there. "Welcome to London, madam," he said. She walked in. 6 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in early November, with the particular stillness of a day that has not decided yet whether to be cold, a Piper Comanche sat in a hangar at Republic Airport in Farmingdale, Long Island. It had been repainted. The old color scheme was gone. In its place, deep navy with a single stripe of gold along the fuselage. Tail number N338. There was no press, no cameras. No ceremony in the official sense of the word. There were 14 young women between the ages of 17 and 29 standing in a half circle in front of the plane looking at it the way you look at a door you have been told many times in many ways is not for you. The N338 initiative had been assembled in 6 weeks. Naomi's team had moved fast because Naomi's team always moved fast when she had decided something was important. The scholarship covered flight training in full. The applicants had been selected on aptitude and economic need. None of them had been asked about their backgrounds in the way those questions are usually asked, as a screen rather than an introduction. The first student to sit in the cockpit was Jasmine, 17 years old from Newark, New Jersey, the third time she had applied for any aviation scholarship because the first 2 had politely suggested she consider other fields. She climbed into the left seat with the deliberate care of someone who has waited a long time for a moment and does not want to rush through it. She put her hands on the controls. She looked forward through the windscreen at the gray November morning beyond the hangar doors. Outside, Naomi stood with her back against the hangar wall and watched through the window. She did not go in. This was not her moment to stand inside. She had built the room. That was enough. Douglas Holt was at his house in Long Island that morning, approximately 18 miles away. His FAA inquiry was ongoing. His legal situation had been described to him by 3 different attorneys in 3 different ways, all of which amounted to the same thing. He was learning slowly and painfully what it costs to build a life on a certainty that was never as solid as it felt. He did not know about the Saturday morning in the hangar. He did not know that the plane he had restored with his own hands, the rivets he had replaced the avionics, he had rewired the leather he had fitted to the seats, was teaching a 17-year-old from Newark what the controls feel like when you are the one holding them. Naomi watched Jasmine through the hangar window. She watched the girl look forward through the windscreen. She thought this is what it is actually for, not the acquisition, not the firing, not the footage or the headlines or the 4 million views. All of that was the process. This was the point. She pushed off from the wall and walked back toward the car. She had a board meeting in the city at noon. There was a lot to fix. She was looking forward to it. Patricia Morse received her termination notice by email on a Tuesday morning 3 days after the incident. The email was brief and specific. It cited the documented fabrication of a dress code policy, the hostile check-in interaction captured on terminal camera footage, and a pattern of conduct previously flagged but not actioned by previous management. Patricia did not contest it. She had watched the footage. She knew what was on it. Travis Webb kept his position, not because what he had done was unimportant. Standing beside Holt, following rather than questioning, adding bureaucratic weight to something he knew was wrong. But because he had, in the end, said let go. 2 words. Late. But said. Naomi had a policy about late courage. It counted for less than early courage, but it counted. He completed a mandatory remediation program. He wrote a formal letter of acknowledgement to Naomi. 11 drafts over 6 weeks because he kept writing things that sounded like explanation rather than acknowledgement, and someone on her team kept sending it back. The final version was 4 paragraphs. It said what it needed to say and stopped. She read it. She did not respond. That was, he was told, the response. Amber Lou's appointment as lead cabin operations trainer was announced internally on a Wednesday. The module she had been drafting on a napkin at 35,000 feet became the first new required training for all Callaway cabin crew in 4 years. It ran 60 minutes, included 3 case studies, and ended with a question it did not answer. What is the difference between following a rule and using a rule as a shield? How do you know which one you are doing? The first cohort of crew to go through it said almost unanimously in their feedback forms. This should have existed 10 years ago. Sofia Navarro was called into a meeting with Naomi 3 weeks after the incident. It was a short meeting. Naomi asked her one question. Why did you not say anything more at the gate? Sofia had been thinking about that question since October 14th. She had a real answer. I did not think it was my place. I had been told in 100 small ways that my place was the scanner and the boarding pass and the smile, not the judgment call. Naomi said, that is the culture I am changing. Starting now, it is your place. Sofia was appointed Passenger Advocacy Coordinator, the first person to hold the position in the 80-year history of Callaway Atlantic. Her role to be the person passengers could reach when something was wrong and the normal channels were not working. To be in the language of the org chart, the institutional equivalent of what Rosa Delgado had done in that jet bridge by putting her hand on Naomi's shoulder. Sofia accepted the position with the specific combination of nerves and clarity that attends any moment when your actual work finally matches what you believed your actual work should be. In the 6 weeks after the incident, Callaway Atlantic received 0 formal discrimination complaints. Not because the problem had disappeared, because for the first time people believed someone would actually listen. The next time Naomi Rivers flew Callaway Atlantic 3 weeks after London, she booked seat 1A on the New York to Los Angeles route. She wore the Howard University hoodie. She told no one she was coming. She arrived at the gate like any other passenger. She scanned her boarding pass. She walked down the jet bridge. Nobody stopped her. The gate agent, a young man she did not know, new hire had not been there in October, smiled and said welcome aboard in the automatic but genuine way of someone who means it without thinking about it, which is the best version of the thing. She sat in 1A. She put her backpack in the overhead. She looked out the window at the tarmac. The same kind of tarmac. A different city. The same window. A flight attendant appeared. She held a glass of sparkling water, no ice. Naomi looked up. Did I order this passenger preference note? The flight attendant said. It is in the system. Was it right? It is right, Naomi said. The flight attendant smiled and moved on. Naomi sat back. She looked at the glass of water sitting on the console beside her. Such a small thing. A note in a system, a preference, remembered someone deciding before she arrived that her comfort mattered. Such a profoundly ordinary act of hospitality. It should not have felt like progress, but it did. The boarding door closed. The engines began their low, growing hum. The plane moved. And somewhere over western Pennsylvania, Naomi Rivers closed her laptop, folded her hands in her lap, and fell asleep in seat 1A. A real sleep, the kind that reaches the bottom, the kind that only comes when the mind finally believes that the place it is in is safe. She slept for 4 hours. She woke up over the Mojave, the desert orange and infinite below the sky, clear blue above the engines doing what engines do, carrying her forward indifferent to everything except physics. She picked up her water. She looked out the window. She thought, This is what it is supposed to feel like. Then she opened her laptop and went back to work. And that is why you never, ever judge someone by how they are dressed. Captain Holt thought he was protecting a standard. What he was actually doing was protecting an assumption, one he had never had to examine because no one had ever made him. And when someone finally did, the assumption could not hold its own weight for 19 minutes in a tunnel with dozens of cameras and the internet watching. Naomi Rivers did not come to that jet bridge to make a point. She came to take a seat she had paid for on a plane she had bought. Everything that followed was Holt's choice. And then the consequences were his too. If this story hit you somewhere real, if you have been dismissed, looked past, told the space you are in is not for someone like you, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your city in the comments. Tell me what you thought about that moment in the jet bridge. If you enjoyed this story of quiet strength and real justice, please hit that like button right now. It only takes a second, and it helps this channel reach more people who need to hear stories like this. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video like this one. Every week we bring you powerful stories about dignity, courage, and what happens when people refuse to be erased. Ring the notification bell so you are always the first to know. And share this video with someone in your life who has ever been told they do not belong somewhere they had every right to be. Your share might be exactly what someone needs today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. I will see you in the next one.